Welcome to Creative Mornings. Today, our theme is revolution, and we have Tuuti Piippo speaking. Come on!
I'm not a morning person, so I really appreciate all of you coming at this hour. As an author, my job is to listen to people's stories. And right now I'm in a place in the world where I'm in the middle of all kinds of makers. And they are entrepreneurs, artists, designers, inventors, hackers, programmers, all kinds of people who make new things, who have this urge to create something meaningful in the world. And those are the makers of many of the revolutions that have an impact on our lives today. So I spent the last 2 years in San Francisco, where a lot of the new revolutionary technology is made in Silicon Valley. And you just meet people changing the world there every day. And it's kind of mind-blowing. And I've come to kind of see firsthand that it's true what was it Alan Kay who said that the best way to predict the future is to invent it or build it. And that's how a lot of the makers describe it as well. And that's why I often say that I'm actually living in the future, because you can see into it when you're surrounded by the people who make it. This is a photo of a game that my friends are making. I went to visit them. They're actually in Helsinki, so not all of the revolutions happen in San Francisco. It's a virtual reality game called Pollen, and it's one of the first ones in the world of that scale and that quality. And I was in that space. I've tried it before. It still makes me kind of nauseous to be in there. I don't know if you tried Oculus, but it feels funny, and it's just a really, really interesting space right now. Oculus was it yesterday that they officially launched the Rift. And I saw some headlines about the virtual reality revolution being true right now this week. So it's kind of the perfect time to be in it. And yeah, these are people who are Finnish. They're people I used to work with at my first startup job. And I think it's a perfect example how you can kind of make revolution start from anywhere. VR is interesting to me because it's not just about entertainment. Even though it starts with games often, it can have a huge impact on the way we are in the world and how we see the world. And there's a lot of research being done about how being in a virtual reality environment can affect our empathy. For example, we can see the news, be in the news in somewhere like Syria, where you see the things happening in the news on the street, and you're in there and you actually feel how the people feel. So that's a huge shift towards a more empathetic way of understanding the world. It's being used for therapy, healthcare, education. And so the implications can be kind of revolutionary, to say the least. And they're even talking about saving journalism with virtual reality, so that's one. So this book is one of my 3 of the ones I've written so far. And they're all about different topics. So the first one was about failure and learning from failure. This one is about women who are changing the world through building new technology. And the one that's not out yet, but is going to be soon in the US, it's about the future of healthcare in America. And they're kind of like, they sound like they're really different, but what's the common theme in them is that I interview people who are making something new and interview people who are somehow building the future in all of them. And for me, it's been a quest to understand these people, and maybe also a quest to understand myself in a way. This is this is the world I grew up in. How many of you played Mario? Almost everybody. So you can feel the nostalgic feeling, yeah. I had a sister who was very curious about technology and games especially, and she kind of pulled me into this world and made me excited about games and the internet and everything. And we played Mario where Mario and Luigi were always saving the princess. But then somebody had made this game that had 2 sisters with like this fierce energy, this huge hair, and they were just like punching their opponents and being heroes by themselves. And Gianna's Sisters was the one I think we played most since then. And I think that kind of helped us see that we don't have to be the ones, the girls who are waiting for a hero to save us. We can be the ones who become our own heroes and save ourselves. And my sister also taught me HTML when I was 11. I was in love with a boy band called Hanson, and that's kind of embarrassing, but now you know. So we made a website for Hanson. Yeah, I was 11. We made it in English. I learned HTML. I learned to make all these shining stars and put photos in there and do everything.
You don't have a screen capture?
No, I can't find it anymore. I'm kind of grateful for that. That's a good thing. It's somewhere very deep. But yeah, technology has always been kind of a natural part of my life because of my sister. But also we grew up in a home where that was filled with books, all kinds of stories. I used to do dance and arts, and like I was curious about everything. And the culture and the technology, they were just part of the kind of the same thing. They were never separate for me until I went to school and heard that you kind of have to choose. Whether you're this creative person or this math person who does technology stuff. And I still don't see the kind of the valley between them, because all I see is how they help each other and how they create things together. So that's kind of my starting point with technology and why I'm so excited about it many times, because it's all the same thing. This is something that I have in common with all the makers I meet. So most of them were really excited about many things growing up. And they were just kind of creating worlds and combining worlds all their lives. And because I had this role model, like a strong girl and a woman, I started to see that not all girls have that. Not all girls learn these things early on, and so I started wishing that everybody would have that kind of role model as I had. So I wanted to write a book that's full of them and can make younger women excited about this field, because that's where you make a lot of the revolutions today. A wise friend of mine, Lauri Järvilehto, often says that the future is always a story first. And many times it's been very true that it's been invented by science fiction authors. And something like virtual reality has been fiction when we used to play Mario, but in these 20-something years it's become science fact. And so that's why we need the storytellers and we need the makers who combine the fiction with the fact eventually. This is a question I often ask my interviewees and myself. And I'll tell you a few of the stories I've found so far. Let's see. There are a lot of women in the history of science and technology that we've never heard about. I never heard about Barbara McClintock until last week, but she was a groundbreaking scientist. She was one of the, I think, first Nobel Prize women who won the whole prize without sharing with anyone. And she found some things that have affected the way we understand our genes, which is kind of important because it has to do with each and every one of us. And she laid the groundwork for a lot of the science that's now called epigenetics, which can be, I don't try to explain it, but it can have a huge impact on how we see ourselves, how we live our lives, because it affects our children and their children. And they're still kind of baffled about how this whole thing works. But she figured it out before the 1950s, or the ground for that. And she was so ahead of her peers that when she went to talk at seminars, nobody understood what she was talking about. So they called her crazy, of course. They laughed at her. They ridiculed her, well, they used her name as a synonym for something that was not scientific, basically. And the quote is by a fellow scientist who said that, by God, that woman is either crazy or a genius, and he was onto something. Because she quit publishing her work in the 50s and just started doing it by herself. And it took 30 years before the other science community caught up and saw the value of her work. And then they gave her the Nobel Prize. So this is something that's often similar to many of the stories of revolutionaries. They're misunderstood for sometimes decades. And they have to spend a lot of time alone believing in something that nobody else believes in. And it can be kind of devastating. These are some of the heroes in the history of technology and programming. Ada Lovelace was what's called the first programmer in the 1980s, 18 something. And she was the first one who ever had the idea that a machine could be programmed to do something. and that was so early. She was the child of a mathematician and a poet. And her mother, the mathematician, thought that she had kind of the insanity that her father had, the poet. So she tried to kind of put her into this logical and scientific path. But she couldn't help but to combine the two, and that's what happened. She got some revolutionary ideas, and we can thank her for that, for a lot of things. Oh, her father was Lord Byron, who wrote Don Juan. So, something there. Grace Hopper was a mathematician and one of the great heroes of modern programming. She invented the compiler, which means that she made possible for other people than mathematicians to tell computers what to do. So until the compiler, you had to type in ones and zeros to make the computer do something. And what she invented made it possible to type in words instead of numbers. And that's, well, everything, a lot of the things we see and use today are kind of based on her work. These are some of the women I interviewed for my book, and some of them you might know, some of them not. Natalie Panic is this Canadian superstar in her field. She's a rocket scientist and a space roboticist, I think. That's how you spell it. She's built a solar-powered car that she drove across the United States to Canada. And she's worked on a mission to Mars at NASA. She has built robotic arms that repair satellites in space so that they don't have to like stay floating in space when you can't use them anymore. And that sounds like a huge career, but as you can see, she's about my age and still has a lot to do. And she wants to be an astronaut, so everything she does is kind of geared towards someday becoming an astronaut. That's a great story. Katarina Fake is the founder of Flickr, probably the best photo sharing community on the web. And she's one of the true pioneers in online communities. And also, she tells her story in the book. She started Flickr after the dot-com crash, and she says how it's kind of the best time to start something in the recession when there's not a lot of money around, and the only people who are investing in new things are the smart ones. So you actually have to be creative and create something that people really need. And Christina was the first designer of YouTube. So while you might not know her name, you've used something she's made probably a lot of times. I know I have. And she also has a background in the creative side. So she got interested in making websites because she loved the creative process. And that's what a lot of these women have in common, a big theme. Whoa, we have to run. This is something you can look into if you're interested. I've tried to find a pattern in all these stories, and I've looked into a lot of different story patterns, and Joseph Campbell, I think, has one of the most fascinating ones. It's about heroes, but it's about really ordinary people who get a call to do something different, dive into a new world. And that's what you see as the unknown. That's the biggest part of the hero's journey. They get a lot of help from mentors, helpers, and they face a lot of challenges that help them discover their gifts and talents and powers. And that's how you eventually become a hero, by going through those challenges and even death, as in many myths like Jesus, maybe Harry Potter as well. But all these great stories in the world, they kind of follow this pattern. And I'm fascinated by if it can be applied to real life stories. So the only way forward is by trial and error. And I don't think that heroes are something that we should be like worshipping. I think they're ordinary people, they have their weaknesses, and they just keep on doing what they do, and that's how they become heroes. And if you want to be a hero, you can become one. This photo is a campaign by a software company, and I think it's kind of genius. But what's interesting in the hero's journey is that the setbacks and the challenges are actually the things that make the hero. And that's been a revolutionary idea for me. Here's some of the lessons that come up in a lot of the stories I tell. If you have a feeling or an idea that you could be making something revolutionary, these are really good things to put down, because the makers that I meet, these are the things that they learn through mistakes, and sometimes devastating ones. If you choose the wrong people to work with, it can be very personal to find that out, for example. So they might sound like there's something given, but a lot of these things are not. And because it's gonna get tough, you're gonna face a lot of challenges, you should always work on something that you're really passionate about with the right people. And especially for what women always talk about is that they wish they had started earlier and not doubted themselves so much and for so long and tried to learn everything before they start doing, because you learn the most important things by doing. I think we are all powerful creators, and we have the same potential to create revolutions and create something meaningful and impactful in the world. And what I've found is that we are creating reality all the time anyway. With all our thoughts and our words, our actions, we're creating some kind of reality around us. So why not make it something that you actually want to see in the world, and something that actually solves a problem that is real in the world, because we're not going to run out of them anytime soon. Not all people want to be heroes or future makers or revolutionaries or crazy people. But you can support the ones around you, and you can give them space to be curious about many things, and to let them take apart clocks and whatever they want to take apart and build them again. And in any situation, you can be the leader who tells their story first, opens their mouth and shares something embarrassing, because it creates a safe space for others to do so. And that's the space where we can take risks and we can create new ideas. That's Earth from the moon, by the way. And whenever I get scared, that's surprisingly often, I look at this picture. Can you see the dot? That's Earth from the greatest distance we've ever gotten a picture of it. So I read or listen to Carl Sagan's fantastic talk about the small blue dot. And every person who ever lived on this earth is there, on that dot, has been there. And every revolution that ever took place on earth has been there. And it gives you kind of a perspective into how scary, how real that fear is, how much it matters if you fail. Not a lot. So the question I often ask myself is, what could be the best way for me to use my talents so that I create something that leaves the world a little better off because I was here. And that's something that often starts at least personal revolutions. Thank you.